As the game progresses in development and the years go by, looking at the past to find interesting things in retrospect becomes a fun pastime of mine. And Genshin Impact has recently passed 4 years of service. I seriously can't believe 2020 was 4 years ago, goodness. Looking through everything, something I want to talk more about was the notion of forgotten mechanics. Aspects of the game that appeared as if they were going somewhere with it, but have either since discontinued it, or maybe they just haven't gotten around to expanding it yet. Nothing wrong with that, mind you. Sometimes there are mechanics for systems that just don't work out and they get left behind. But to Genshin's credit, I appreciate that they actually went back and revitalized a number of them. For example, we all thought Crystallize would never see the light of day again and be relegated to a garbage reaction. But then they turned it into an interesting mechanic through an obvious kit. Same applies to plunging attacks. It used to be that Shell was the only one part of this niche, but then earlier in version 4 they brought Gaming and Xianyun, making plunging attacks a competitive rogue strategy. Just recently we got Emily and Kanish, who brought more attention to the burning reaction after having been practically forgotten about over the years. So I like that they're touching on aspects of the game that used to not get any attention. But there are still a few more I want to go through, so I think it would make for a fun video to look through some of Genshin's old forgotten mechanics. The first one I want to go over, and the one that's going to take up most of the video, will be Geo-constructs. For the longest time, Geo was considered the worst element in all of Genshin Impact for consisting of ideas that didn't really get anywhere or were more gimmicky than practical. Geo-constructs used to be a huge deal back in version 1 and a defining aspect of the Geo element. For the uninitiated, Geo-constructs are man-made structures that either function as terrain or can be interacted with, which can either be made by the player or enemies. A good example would be the iconic Dominus Lapidus created by Zhongli. Typically glossed over in favor of the shield, the pillar can technically be climbed over, giving players the ability to temporarily instantiate terrain to help out in overworld exploration or occasionally in combat. Currently, we have 6 units who can produce one. Albedo Solarized Satoma spawns a platform on the ground that can elevate the player if they stand on it, allowing players to perform plunging attacks even on flat terrain, and of course the benefit of elevating the player in case they wanted to synergize it with Kasaha or Venti's upward draft to give them more verticality. We just went over Zhongli's pillar, but in addition to it being climbable, it also resonates with other Geo-constructs and pulsates damage every so often. Ningguang's Jade Screen creates a big panel in front of her that can be used to block enemy projectiles, which I believe makes her the first and only character in Genshin with this type of ability, though evidently the Jade Screen cannot be climbed or physically interacted with. Geo Traveler technically has 2, the first being Starfell Sword, summoning a big boulder that can be climbed or used as terrain to block attacks. Wake of Earth, their elemental burst emits a series of earthquakes that eventually result in the creation of stone walls around the player, functioning exactly like a regular wall, meaning they have to be walked around and can be stood behind. Of the 5 Geo characters available in version 1, 4 of them possess a Geo construct. Not sure about you, but I felt like they were eventually gonna do something with all these, especially after the first Geo character to come out in version 2 was Ito, whose pet bull Ushi, despite being a living creature, does count as a Geo construct. One particular reason for why that would be the case is that Geo-constructs persist on field for long stretches of time, and you can summon multiple of them at once. And let's just say people get really creative with combining Geo-Traveler and Zhongli's constructs, especially when using Neuvillette. Anyways, seeing as how no Geo characters came out for almost 2 years, the first one to come out would be Navia in version 4, who of course had no interactions pertaining to Geo-constructs at all. Chiori though does have something related to them. Her skill Fluttering Hasode summons a doll that can attack alongside her, but if there's a Geo construct available, she gets to summon a second one, though it should be noted that she has no actual interactions with Geo constructs. It merely serves to be a prerequisite for her to get the full scope of her DPS. Furthermore, Chiori's dolls do not count as constructs themselves. It merely serves to be a prerequisite for her to get the full scope of her DPS. Then we enter version 5 and the most recent unit to come out with a Geo construct, Kachina, although you'd be hard pressed to say that it's a Geo construct in anything beyond name only. Turbo Twirly can only be interacted with by her, setting it apart from other Geo constructs which are meant to persist on field, whereas this one disappears upon swapping out. As you can see, Geo constructs or characters with some semblance of relation to them technically have been getting continuously updated, but compared to the ones we got in version 1, the characters of version 4 and 5 don't follow the exact same rule set, and place a lot less emphasis on the notion of creating physical terrain for players to move around. Then again, in the case of Kachina and the rest of Natlan, explorations become a total breeze courtesy of their Night Soul mounts. The thing about Geo-constructs that has me mildly disappointed in how the mechanic turned out is that there's so much potential for something like this, both as a general combat gimmick and also as a way to flesh out the Mono Geo team even more. From a strategic perspective, being able to summon walls and structures presents many interesting applications in battle that can offer a fun way to complete it. For example, if you're fighting a boss known for a series of earthquakes that deal huge amounts of damage, you could use Albedo's Geo construct to levitate in the air the same way you could use Venti's updraft or Wanderer's flight capability. Or if there's a boss that charges around the field recklessly, there could be a special mechanic where if it collides into a wall, such as the ones made by Zhongli or Geo Traveler, then it would be stunned and its defense would be lowered, making it a lot easier to attack. I have always seen Ningguang's Jade Screen as one of the biggest wasted potentials in the entire game. A window that can block projectile attacks could have made her a very strong situational attacker for bosses with an arsenal of them, but it's ultimately made pointless in light of you being able to straight up tank the hits with a conventional shield or iframe through it with elemental burst animations. Simply having the option to create a geo construct and hide behind it temporarily would have added a deeper layer of strategy and maybe a fun gimmicky way to counter a boss that would otherwise take a lot more effort to beat. Pushing the idea further, despite having their own designation, geoconstructs don't really interact with each other that much, if at all. I believe the only recorded instance is Zhongli's pillar, causing nearby constructs to emit the same pulsing effect to extend its effective range. That's about as far as it goes. Itozushi doesn't do anything to Ningguang's Jade Screen, which doesn't do anything to Albedo's Elevator, which doesn't do anything to Kachina's Spinning Top. It's a missed opportunity considering one of the focal points of the Geo element is birds of a feather flocking together. We've since expanded on the mono element playstyle a bit more with characters like Linny for mono pyro or Xiaofar's Xianyun going mono animo. That is, unless you count Farina as disqualifying that team from being mono animo. The OG mono team though was always mono geo. Initially, I was excited to find out that Chiori could spawn a second doll if there was a geo construct nearby, opening up the door for an expansion to mono geo, where you could maybe run Chiori main DPS and then Geo Traveler, Albedo, and Zhongli to allow her to summon an army of dolls to hack and slash at nearby enemies. Then I found out only one extra doll can be spawned by this effect, turning the geo construct requirement from an idea for a fun rogue strategy into just a party requirement, and if you go see one Chiori, you don't even need a geo construct to begin with. Secondarily, it would have been fun to make a character that can use player-made constructs in an offensive way. For the most part, geo constructs, the structural ones at least, merely exist to just be structures, but if there was a geo character who perhaps made it so you can explode geo constructs to deal AoE damage, or perhaps do something with them to where, in a similar fashion to Zhongli's pillars causing nearby constructs to emit the same pulsating damage, they could do so in a chain reaction way to deal huge amounts of geo damage in a short time. There was so much they could do with this concept that it frustrates me how insignificant it is. The only recent geo construct we got is attached to Kachina, and 99.9% of the time players probably don't even realize it is one. While I'm very pleased with Geo characters like Navia and especially Shilonen making Geo not suck anymore, I do hope that one day they'll come back to Geo constructs and do what they did to burning and plunging attacks. Release a character who's all about constructs and make it a viable combat engine for the element. Okay, enough about Geo constructs, let's talk about the second forgotten mechanic, although I feel like enough has already been said about the physical element, quote unquote. Still though, it qualifies as a forgotten mechanic in that Hoyo basically left it to die, despite there being once again a ton of potential. Genshin Impact's all about mixing and matching elements to pull off a reaction, but clearly they've entertained the idea of enabling physical damage to be a thing. They created units who specialize in physical damage like Eula and Xinyan. They've made weapons that work towards physical damage like Aquila Favonia, Song of Broken Pines, and the myriad of 4-star weapons carrying physical damage bonus. 2 artifact sets are made available that primarily revolve around physical damage, and to hammer the point home even further, an entire elemental reaction was made around the express purpose of buffing physical attackers. From there on out, Hoyo also made efforts to add units who can support that kind of playstyle like Rosaria, Mika, and so on, so the damage type is by no means a fringe mechanic. There's infrastructure put in place to facilitate that playstyle. Very minimal infrastructure though. Now, Prevailing Wisdom understands a very simple solution to this would be to make actual support for the element that's at a level equal to modern day supports. For example, Shenhe's ultimate reduces both the cryo and physical res of all enemies caught in it by 15%. Obviously 15 is piss all when we have Shilonen and Virtus and Venera hitting upwards of 35. Granted, Superconduct is a 40% physical res reduction, but the real reason physical is struggling is because it has no reaction, it's pure brute force, equivalent to Mono Pyro, Mono Geo, things like that. To be fair, you have a couple buffs with extremely high parameters. Mika C6 helps Eula do 60% bonus crit damage on physical attacks. But I want to look at things a bit further. Maybe we should add more physical reactions, or mechanics pertaining to physical in general. For example, over in Honkai Star Rail we received Harmony MC back in 2.2, and they came with a special Super Break mechanic that was not seen up until that point. Calling Super Break meta-defining would be an understatement. Hoyo should add something like that into physical damage in Genshin to give them strength on par with elemental reactions. Previously, I've always said that they need to make more physical DPS units, more physical supports, and whatnot, but those are ultimately band-aid solutions that can get power crept over time. What physical needs is a foundation, something to legitimize them as more than just a damage type, but a combat engine. I'm still holding out hope that Capitano is secretly a cryophysical attacker, but if they want to revitalize the physical engine, which I mean they've given attention to the freaking burning reaction, so I mean, anything's possible, characters would only be a temporary fix to the underlying issue of there being practically no significant infrastructure for physical at all, merely traces of support or things here and there. Seeing as Hoyo has a penchant for releasing characters that enable entire playstyles like how Shinyan made plunging attacks viable, the best course of action would be to create a unit who either introduces a super break-esque mechanic or a custom reaction along the lines of Nilou converting Bloom cores into Bountiful cores. That being said, we also still have yet to actually see physical damage being used on any other weapon type except Claymore. Claymore is the worst weapon type in the game by a wide margin. I stand by the notion that if Eula was a sword user with the exact same kit, meaning she could consistently max out her Lightfall sword, she would actually not be that bad. I may be wrong, but I believe her current best team is herself, Bennett, Farina, and Mika. Honestly a pretty solid team, it's just that Eula herself has a few issues that cannot be overcome with outside help. I don't think they should give up on physical damage. It may not necessarily adhere to the essential experience of mixing and matching elements, but they started it back in version 1, they should see it through. Otherwise, they should never have made it a thing to begin with. Last mechanic for today is going to be counters. This is a really niche aspect of the game, but believe me, it was a tremendous selling point for one of Genshin's most popular characters in version 1. Counter-attacking is not a formally acknowledged mechanic, but there are 3 units in the game with identical systems behind it, making it just worthwhile enough to talk about it. The 3 in question would be Beidou, Yunjin, and Candice. To introduce you to what I'm talking about in case you don't know what they do, let's take a look at Beidou. Beidou's elemental skill Tidecaller allows you to hold the skill and enter a stance, gaining a shield during that time. Said shield only applies to her and for the activation, so upon ending the skill the shield will disappear. If an enemy strikes her during that time, the attack she conducts in return will deal increased damage, significantly increased damage at that. To achieve this, you either have to get struck twice while in that stance or through her A1 passive, getting struck during the animation of her skill. While compared to modern day standards it doesn't look that amazing, for a 4-star character released back then, doing 830% with the skill on a 7.5 second cooldown was nothing short of impressive. Yunjin also has this ability, wherein upon holding the skill you enter a stance and gain a shield, charging up over time to increase the strength of her attack. Once again, she can do a lot of damage at full charge. Coincidentally, she has the same exact A1 passive as Beidou. There's a bit of a pattern here. Candice, same thing, hold your skill to gain a stance, if you hold it long enough, she does big PP damage. One more time, her A1 passive is identical to Beidou and Yunjin's. That would be the last time we had a counter-attacking unit. You might have also noticed that all counter-attackers are 4-star characters. Am I the only one who wishes Hoyo made a 5-star character with a counterattack? Considering how much people enjoyed playing Beidou in version 1 and the fact that they made 2 more characters with the exact same mechanic, this could also make for an interesting playstyle, and lately we've been going through characters with a bunch of different playstyles. Counterattacking is always a satisfying thing to pull off in a video game since it requires timing and situational awareness. Not to mention, the payoff you get for achieving a counter should ideally be worth the hassle it takes to obtain it. As a random example, for you League players out there, you might recall the absolute satisfaction of a late game 6-item set using a full power haymaker to one-shot the entire enemy team. The same experience can apply here, creating a 5-star character who enters a stance and prepares an attack that grows stronger the more times they get hit, to where the end result could potentially be like 5000% in damage. Trust me, gamers are thirsty for big PP damage, it's a fact of life. More ways to do big PP damage are always welcome, and counter-attacking could be a way to do that. In all honesty, there are several mechanics in Genshin that would make for really interesting playstyles if Hoyo gives it more attention. I'm not saying they will, they'd probably prefer to go for newer ideas like how they've been making the Netland units, but it's always fun to look back on what could have been. I'm a sucker for nostalgia, what can I say? So what are your thoughts on the forgotten mechanics I talked about? Do you believe there are more I could look into? You're welcome to share in the comments. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at VarsFarum, join my Discord server, and check out my other Genshin discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.